What is not said that I worked for as an associate curator at the Tamayo Museum. That is, I think, the first museum dedicated to contemporary art in Mexico City. I worked there from 2009 to 2013. But what I never put on my resume is that during those 5 years, I passed for 3 different directors, 3 different chief curators, 3 different sizes of museum. And it was like being in 3 different institutions in just a very short period of time. And it's why I just put this name, Curating from Mexico, a collaborative practice, because curating in Mexico or from Mexico is not something that you do alone. You always work with a team, and that team changed so many times. And you work with people that is moving all the time too. So it's you need to create this community very, very fast. And so just to have an idea, this is the actual floor plan of the museum. The part that is in white on the left of the image, and the red, green, and purple galleries were the original museum. Half of the museum were shut down for a year, for 3 years. So for a year and or a little bit more than a year, we worked just in half of the museum. That was great because we have half of the space, but the same budget. That allows us to do a lot of different projects and to invest in something that was never done before at the museum, is publications. And then after being closed for a year, we have all these new spaces, including a new auditorium, that we needed to create a program for it. So it was not an easy thing to do, especially because in the meantime, we changed 3 times the direction of the museums in every sense, not just the administrative part, but also the chief curators change, and a new curatorial direction came every time. When I was thinking about my presentation, there are 2 projects that I normally don't talk about it because I didn't consider it mine projects because I was not the chief curator, I was not the main curator of the project. And for some reason, just going back to them, I realized that in both cases, I signed that project as a collaborator. It's, both projects have the name of the main curator, that is, in this case, Magnolia Arreola. That was at the time the chief curator of the Tamayo. But instead of put my name or sign it as an associate curator or like assistant curator, she just proposed me to be in collaboration with. And I think that changed everything, because when you just co-curate or when you assist a chief curator, in a way your tasks are very delimited by the chief curator. You are, even if you propose something, you're under their voice. And co-curating means like you both have the idea. And in both cases, I think that it came something very different. When we started this project, the director was Sofia Hernandez Choncuy, and we just have half of the space, and we create a series of exhibitions that was not related one to another, but was more like an idea that it repeats. In this case was minor history, larger words, and was this as the point of this exhibition was talking about this chapter of history that are not like main chapters or not like big histories, but just these side stories that just complete the big discourse. And A Place Out of History, that is the name of this show, was an idea of Magali that she was really interested after doing her PhD in San Diego of talk about the Cold War in art and how it reflected to the contemporary art. And so she wanted to have this story of espionage, but she couldn't find the right players for it. And it was a funny fact that instead of find like artist working with espionage. She was in front of these characters that were more like, more than espionage, were like more like a forgers. They forged documents, they forged histories. So we were talking about these artists, and it came like I knew the story of Tina Modotti, that is this photographer that used to be an actress here in Hollywood in the 20s. She went to Mexico. She was the lover of Edward Weston there, and he teach her photography. She became a photographer in Mexico, and then after some political issues and problems that she had there, she was forced to abandon Mexico. She went to Europe. She went to the USSR, and she was one of the first non-Soviet characters to join what it was the pre-KGB. She was a spy, and as long as she knew a lot of different language, she assumed different personalities in order to arrive to the communist parties all over Europe with information. At some point in her career, she just left the USSR to join the Republican Army in the Civil War in Spain. And we thought that story was amazing because in a way she was a person that started her career in front of the camera. Then she took the camera, and finally she abandoned even the scene of art. She abandoned her own camera in Moscow, and she never took a photograph again. She came back to Mexico. So we find all these characters. This is the part of Tina Modotti that was not just her photographs, but the letters that she wrote to Edward Weston, where she was in Mexico, but also in Berlin, the last city where she did some pictures. And there's also a portrait of a very strange and dark character that was her last companion, Carlos Vidali, that was also Italian, also involved with the Communist Party, and it was the guy who took her to the USSR. So all the stories are there, and all these, some reproductions from the newspaper when she died in Mexico, in very mysterious way. But we find also this kind of artist that doesn't look contemporary at all, and that's the intention of the painter. His name was Hans van Meegeren, and the story is fascinating. He was a painter that never had succeed as a painter, and he started to forge art. And in order to be a very good forger, he realized that he not just need to forge a paint, but forge a history. And he create, that's fascinating because he just create these new works by Vermeer, the painter that is very well known and is very particular. And he was so smart that convinced the art critics of the time and the connoisseurs of the time that this kind of painting, this religious painting, was a real Vermeer from a different period, an unknown period. So it was a mix between the will to find a new kind of paintings by him for the market, but also the will of these connoisseurs or art historians to just arrive to something that nobody knows except them. So he forged I don't know how many paintings by Vermeer that with a big format. And the story will be like that until the war started. The Nazis took Holland, and as they did in some other places, they just spoiled the national treasures or like the particular collection. And one of these paintings, I think this is this one, arrived to the Goebbels collection. Goebbels was really, really behind a Vermeer painting, but every time that he find one, it was for the Führer, because he has the first choice. And so he was so happy with this painting that when finally in 1945 the American army arrived to Germany, to Goebbels' place. I like these stories. I'm taking more time to telling. But he was so in love with this painting that he asked his maid to run away with it, to hiding from the army. But finally the army found it, and Van Meegher was in trial in Holland for collaboration, for being collaborate with this expo or the national treasures in Holland to sell this painting to Goebbels. And during his trial, he revealed himself, and he just showed in a public demonstration during trial that it was him that did all these paintings. So in order to survive and not being judged as a traitor, he became a national hero because he was a very good forger. And he saw again, and he forged his own history, saying that he was a hero because he just, sell a copy, a fake to Goebbels. So he was cheating to the Nazis, and he was like a national hero. He passed away after the trial, like in the 50s, and just in the 70s, an art historian from Holland discovered the truth, that he was a fascist. He was not intended to cheat the Germans in any sense, that in fact the first fake paintings by Vermeer that he saw, he used the money to create the first fascist magazine in Holland. So, all these stories that came, that are the two main characters of this show that we did with Magali. And I think we have a lot of fun. And as long as the subject was really fascinating, every time that we start to talk about this conversation during dinner, and there were other artists or other curators, there's always a person that contributes with a name. Mario Garcia Torres, that happens to be Magali's husband, came with this story of Domingo Malagon, for example. Domingo Malagon was an art student when the Civil War in Spain started, and he joined the Republican Army. And he was such a good painter in a way. It's not very clear on these paintings that is hanging on the wall, but all the documents that are on the vitrine are like fake documents, are like passports, like work permits that he produced over 20, 30 years, been hiding in Paris in a space that was like 14 square meters, working between 12 and 16 hours in each document, just to provide documentation and a free pass to the communist members in Spain. And in return, he was thankful for the Communist Party with holidays in Eastern Europe, because he was a communist, and he had this idea that when Franco will let the power in Spain, he will return and retake his career. So he went to these places. This is Praga, what we have there. And he just traveled with this small bag that I was able to see at his place. He was still alive. He was like 96 years old when I visited him in Madrid. And he just told me this story. And this is very naive paintings where he was doing, and he just hid some fake documents with him. He was just transporting documentation, because if you have a passport with a stamp of a communist country, you were not able to enter Spain again. So he was just erasing or creating new documents all the time with other politicians or members of the Communist Party. So this guy has this amazing sentence about his work, and I think it's part of what it makes this show possible, or that he used to say that in order to be success in his career, he should be on the shadows. So it's against what every artist wants. Every artist wants like being recognized by the critic or by the public, by an audience, by the market, doesn't matter, in order to just to be succeed. But he doesn't want that. So it's it happens just these kind of stories were fascinated, and the name A Place Out of History came from a text by a fake Walter Benjamin, that is also a fictive character that we found, that he said that there's all these stories that are on the corridors of a history, and there are places out of history. So in a way, when I think about this project, I think about all these collaborations, about all this exchange of information, that we always have an anecdote, and it can't happen that an anecdote became part or a key part of an exhibition as it happens here. On the top, those books are from Jill Magid. There's an artist from New York. And we just hear about her twice from different people. And it's like a kind of modern spy. She was living in Europe when the Dutch Secret Service opened, what made an open call that was a little bit strange for an artist just to create the public face or a public monument or a public something of the organization. That was like, when you start to think, it's like this Dutch Secret Service that make an open call just to create a public face of the organization is like, there's something that is not working. And Jill was fascinated by this challenge, and she won this open call, and she presented this project in which she interviewed different members of the Secret Service, always named Miranda or Victor. These people that she met like casually in bars, they approached them and it's like, I'm Victor, I'm Miranda. And at the end of the project, she did like, there were very different pieces. And she presented some of them at Tate. And when the Secret Service, the Dutch Secret Service realized that she was revealing a lot of information, she was called to the office of the director, and she just take her computer, her archives, and was really like a question of negotiating what kind of information she could reveal or not. And this book is the result of this conversation. It's called The Redacted Manuscript, where she just is telling the story of becoming almost a spy, because she got this information by talking and talking. And she was scared, but she's a very tough artist and a very tough person, even if she's small, and tiny and pretty. And she just created that. She did an amazing performance that is more like a play that we just present at the auditorium, because this exhibition also had a very important component that is, besides the time of being in the galleries, we're working with Simon Starling, with this amazing piece that are like these sculptures or replicas of sculpture of Henry Moore that was for the monument to the victims of Hiroshima. That was a commission of Anthony Blunt. Anthony Blunt was this important art historian from England that was in charge of the Royal Collection, but it happens that at some point in his career, it was revealed that he was a spy for the KGB in England. So all the stories came together, and Simon Starling that loves those pieces.
Is that in the museum?
Yes, that's the main patio or the courtyard that I call is this space. And for me, it's the heart of the museum. There's a very like vivid and dynamic space. So he was working on a film about the stories that also is related with James Bond, because Ian Fleming, the writer behind James Bond, was a neighbor of an architect that he hated because was too modern. But he has this architect that's on the entrance of his house, a sculpture by Henry Moore. So we start just to join the points. And the video was not ready for the exhibition, but we presented later as a side program, as we publish a book by French-Mexican art critic curator that is Olivier Debray, that before dying he was writing a novel about traitors called Traidor y Tú. So as part of the exhibition, we just present the book that has a lot of image in the sense of, I just forget the name of this German author, but was like built with image that he found in like markets or like secondary archives, like were on sale. And we find like it was really important just to have this book printed, and it was one of the pieces of the show. And once again, we need to collaborate with former friends of Olivier in order to finish the novel, because it was unfinished and the last chapters didn't exist really. So once again, we work with more people that were not part of the main project, but just help us to realize how to end certain pieces. And passing is not like a chronological story. This is Olinka, or where movement is created. In 2010, we invited Adam Shimshik, now the director of the next Documenta, to do a show at the Tamayo. He said yes. It was under Sophia's direction, but a month after we invited him and he came and did his first visit to Mexico, Sophia left the museum. And for 15 days, we didn't have a director. He was like, what's going on there? And finally, we have in January, it was December, and for January, we have a new director. She didn't arrive with a whole team, but lately it happens that the chief curator and the other associate curator left the museum, so I was alone. And I wait for a new team to come for almost a year. And during that time, I worked a lot with Adam. He came to Mexico 2 more times before the opening. And it was funny because he was very clear that he wanted to do something with Dr. Atl, that is a Mexican modern painter. But Adam always is looking just to have like counterpart on a female figure. He doesn't like to do like a macho show or something. So he was there and he was not finding that person. And I suggested to do something with Nawiolin. Nawiolin was the name, that artistic name put by Dr. Atl, that was her lover for a while. And it happens that she was one of the most beautiful girls or women of her time. The daughter of a general. She came from a rich family. She was highly educated in Europe and in Mexico, but she was like a force of nature. That is also the name Olin, that is in Olinka. And Olinka is a project by Dr. Atl that is a most crazy project that an artist ever thought in Mexico or conceived. He wanted to create this city that just inhabited by scientists and artists, and the whole purpose of that city will be the conquest of the space. The conquest of the space, really like a NASA thing, but not using physics or anything, just like more a mental conquest of the space. He was really thinking that with the power of the mind, we just can navigate a spaceship. It was really crazy, But he was very convinced that people like González Camarena, that is the inventor of a color TV, was involved with the project. And González Camarena works also for NASA later. So it was not that crazy how people just believe it. And he was like for years asking the government to donate land in order to create this city. He has, I have the budget, the letters are over there. It's in the National Library in Mexico, and I had access to them. So it was the first step of my collaboration with Adam. Adam wanted to do something with Dr. Atl, but he didn't want to do the typical things or to repeat the idea that he did in Basel at the Kunsthalle, where he presented his landscapes, because Dr. Atl is better known for his landscapes. So I came with, these projects exist. There are no drawings, there are nothing, but we have the documentation. We have the booklets that he printed. We have all these letters to the authorities and some sketches that he just drew in the margins of the documents. And he was fascinated. On the other side, we have a very naive portrait by Nawiolin. And don't be confused, Nawiolin was a very good painter, and she decided to be naive. And the more Adam gets in contact with Nawiolin's story, the more that he falls in love with her. I can assure you that, because he didn't know anything about the woman. And he, at the end, I'm pretty sure that he's not interested on her paintings. For the time, on the 20s and 30s and 40s, the time where she was active as an artist, she paints herself naked. She paints herself with all her lovers. Just think about Mexico in those years. We are still a very conservative country, and the 40s were not better, especially for women. We discovered an art historian that is even more in love with Nawiolin than it was Adam, that collect everything from her, all these books of poetry that she wrote, that is also related with the last one is Energia Cosmica, for example, also related with concept of science. This collector had also her private library. And we discovered that in as early of 1910, 1912, she was reading Einstein theory. And I think that Adam just fell in love with her, and that love just made that the whole show was an excuse to talk about her in a very different ways. So the list of artists is huge. We include, like, of course, paintings by Nawiolin. The list of artists is Paulino Losca, Thea Georgiadze, Kay Davis, Vivian Suter, that was shown here at the Mistake Room, Elizabeth Weil, who else? A lot of Thea, Jambo, and Nairi Bakramian, Jos Birrell from Scotland. And at the end, all the artists did something related with Nawiolin. This kind of curtain, it's the name of Nawiolin, in a very strange alphabet created by Thea. The big paintings, and also the sculpture, were the works by Paulino Losca, who, if you are not familiar with her practice, she's very concerned about the image of women through history of art, but also with fashion. And in a way, she just recreated on this painting some portraits of Nawiolin from other artists. So the show was like, I think my contribution was just to present Adam to these two characters in a very different way, as not as is shown in history. And I was not the curator, so it was not my idea. And if you tell me about the show, he say that it's about the movement and the history and the force of history to changing things. And for me, it's about a show that was about being in love with someone that you don't know, that you are never going to know, and you just transmit your love for that person to other artists. And it was amazing, all this kind of admiration that she just walked in. All the rest of the artists were like really in love with her. And also for this show, what is interesting, that normally curators will just take decisions. And for this show, the display, the colors of the vitrines, and the arrangements of the labels, for example, the text that we put next to each work, were not the decision of Adam, not mine, were the decision took collective by the rest of the artists, and was really an amazing experience. Adam just confessed, I'm blind, so I'm not going to decide the color, I'm not going to decide which picture is going to next to another. He just left the artists take those decisions for him. Of course, he had an idea. The layout of the floor plan was his, to put the 2 video rooms in each part of the room, but also the displays of the central courtyard that he wanted to use, because for him, it was the crater of the volcano. So it's the place where all the movement of the museums start. So back, our Nairobi Ramen piece. On the wall is Jambo, that also made this extraordinary exercise, and very humble, because it was not really a piece by him. Were photographs of one of his professors, that this is American and a scholar that took these pictures of homosexual couples in Vietnam during the war, and he was expelled from the army under the suspect that he was gay. And he's one of the first person that investigates in the 60s the gay life of Guadalajara. So in a kind of homage to that person that is really care for him, he just displayed these subjects and his photographs by him. And in the front, the sculpture by Thea Georgiadze, that was the first artist to arrive and the last one in finish, because she produced everything on the space. And all her pieces are a reaction to the other works on the space. So I don't sign these projects, but my name is always under this collaboration or collaborative. And I really like it. I don't think them as something that just put me aside. And I really enjoyed to work with these 2 figures. They're very different. It was very fun, very stressed. But I think it's two different ways that mark my practice at the Tamayo, especially after working with Magali, that I was close to Jill and helping her to give a shape to the performance and to some other artists. I realized that I wanted to be more close to the artists. And I started with this kind of projects that were like artist projects produced by the museum. This is the model made on cardboard that Monica Sosnowska sent me a few months before the show that we did together. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, you want that in like a 1:1 scale. And this is a fire escape from New York, 7 floors. And you wanted to do it in steel, and you think it's going to behave like this. And I was like, it's going to be a nightmare, and it's going to be impossible. And we spent 1 month together, going every day to the workshop that we found, because at the beginning, she wanted to produce the piece in San Antonio because she worked with them before, and in order just to make this like happen, it was impossible to bring this kind of sculpture from San Antonio to Mexico City because the shipping was impossible. So we decided to produce in Mexico. We found this workshop, amazing workshop. She was a little bit like scared of doing this there. And after it, she continued to go to Mexico to work with these people. And it was amazing. She arrived with her model in the little box. And she's there with Juan, that is the owner of the workshop, an architect. trying to explain him what she's trying to do. And what was great with her, working with her, is not just spend time on the workshop, really, like every morning, because I worked more as a translator, because the people out there didn't speak English, and she doesn't speak Spanish. But every day we took the same, the workshop is in Mexico City, in an area that is, I don't know how to describe it, because it's not like industrial area. It's not a popular neighborhood. It's very wild in a way. And you have all these auto construction houses, like with not architects or architecture not made by architects. And every day we just pass through these places, and she always noticed something different. She's interested not just in architecture, but in how architecture is done and all these solutions that people just find. And we were just assembling this massive structure. And I was, in the afternoons, I should wrote about her. And the first draft of the essay that I wrote, she was like, "You're spending time with me. Why you are just repeating what other people is saying?" I says, I mean, we have this close relation right now. So at the end, just before the opening, I arrived with the text, and she was really happy. The chief curator, Magali, was like, "Why you are submitting this? The other text was better." Yes, because it was more theoretical text. But this was more like about the experience of working with her, of being with her. And I think it's something that I wanted to transmit to the audience. She's not coming for my theoretical work. She's just watching the city, observe what is around, and transforming that to experience and sculptures. So this is the piece assembled at the workshop. And this is the piece inside the museum. So we assemble at this, just there. And I'm happy because this piece was acquired by the museum. The Tamayo doesn't have a budget for acquisitions. And this was like a special effort by the foundation. And I'm going to make just a stop for me to explain what is the museum. The Tamayo Museum is is a public institution that works with public money. But since it didn't born in that way, Tamayo is a very important painter from modern times in Mexico. And in the 80s, late 70s, he decided to open a museum, not for his work, but for his collection. And he was associated with Televisa, that is this media group. And the city government just donated the land, but was a private museum that was run for many years by Robert Littman. And Robert Littman did wherever he wanted, and Tamayo hated all the program. And the last problem between them was the moment when Littman decided to make a big exhibition on Diego Rivera that was like the enemy of Tamayo. So Tamayo, this is enough. We are ending here. I want the divorce. And yes, because it was something like that. So he just blackmailed the president of the time. He was 86, the year of the World Cup in Mexico. And he just made a call to the president's office and was like, "Okay, this is the deal. Or the state takes control of the museums, or I'm going to start a hunger strike in front of all the cameras that are here covering the World Cup." And Tamayo at the time was the only painter alive from that generation. He was a big figure, and he was 80-something. So you just want like an old person, important one, starving himself in front of the cameras. So the state took control of the museum. Televisa group was put aside, and then after decided to open their own museum. And I like this because it's always how stories changing all the time in Mexico and very quickly. By the 91, before he passed away, he just realized that the state was not enough just to govern the museum or do the shows that he wanted to happen. So he created a foundation that is still working, and it's working from the inside of the institution. So it's a big difference with other public institutions in Mexico that they have a board, but it's like an outside board. They have their office inside the museum, and that makes that Tamayo can have the money to do a lot of different things, even when the public money is not there yet. They have